The DIESOL podcast,
Developing innovation in English as a second or other language.
episode 62, Google updates and the impact on Esol, and opening the conversation about closing.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 62. We are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Ixchell Reyes, and we are just around the corner from summer.
It is coming fast. This is my last episode before summer vacation, so that's nice for me. And Ixchell, you're making some changes as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be a temporary supervisor for the next few months. So it's a new area of work that I'll be doing, and I'm excited about that.
Miss Manager. That's very. You'll be mismanaging everything. It'll be great.
That will be amazing.
So I was kind of laughing to myself, Michelle. I didn't mention this in the pre-show, but we made this big announcement, and we're like, hey, we're kind of shifting gears a little bit and all this stuff. And then the first episode back, we're like super digging into tech on this, like probably the most tech related episode we have done in a while. So we're still committed to that change. We are still open. Well, the whole idea, of course, is that it's open, right? That we can have the choice to talk about what we need to and want to talk about. But I was just kind of laughing because I'm like, oh, well, maybe we'll be doing this, and it's like. Tech. Let's jump into it. Technology.
But I mean, we'll have chances to approach other subjects, so people will see it in a few episops.
Yeah, no,
we'll hear the difference of views.
Yeah, we've got stuff in the pipeline for sure. So let's
dive right in.
Yeah, let's dive
jump right in.
Okay, so here's the thing, Ixchell. We had pretty big announcements from Google this week, and like lots and lots of stuff. Not Google for Education.
Yeah, so I was looking on their Google for Education, and I was like, "What update are you talking about?" But still,
it's not Google for Education. It's like just Google Docs and Google developers and all of that stuff. There was tons of stuff that came out this week because they had the Google. OI, I think it's called, like their, the kind of their big conference and announcements and their things going on. So a bunch of new stuff was announced, and all of this is mostly kind of, we'll talk about how it's like Google Docs and other things like that, but it's really interesting to see how it's going to impact language learning and how it's going to impact language learners. As well.
Accessibility, really, actually, it's awesome.
Yeah, so a bunch of stuff. So I just wanted to kind of dive into them, and we can kind of explore as we can, right? Which ones are the ones that are worth it talking about for us right now. And so I think the first thing right off the bat is a bunch of new languages.
24, I think 20.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you look at that list by chance?
We briefly took a look earlier, and I saw Togo in there, a language spoken in Togo, which I have had students from Togo, and that's just amazing to that they could, search in their own dialect, and also I can search, so that's awesome.
Yeah, lots
Quechua. Quechua's in there.
Yeah, there's Kurdish, which is good that they have that. Lots of like kind of languages from different parts of India. So like, India is so big, but like,
Africa.
In Africa, it's like, hey, this language is also spoken by 50 million people. And it's like, oh, okay.
Wow. So, that's just adding, so much more information to all these people that may not have searched because they're more comfortable in another language that they speak.
Yeah.
But, that's not English.
Yeah. So, I do not have a lot of experience with many of these languages, but it's still cool to see that they are available. And I hope, like if I said, it does open up the opportunities. Like, hey, this one student might show up and this is what they're working with.
You just never know. Even if the fact that this is now reaching, like I'm looking at the list, and one of the new languages added is it's Aymara, which is, it says here, from Bolivia, Chile, and Peru. And it's only 2 million people, but that's 2 million people that couldn't access before, right? Yeah. So that's a lot of people.
Yeah. So it's very cool that all these languages are coming. And then, you know, Google for a while has had options inside of the Translate app, inside of the Android phones or whatever. They did that translate a bilingual conversation. I think we've talked about that in the past. Like you can put a phone down, you can have it kind of record, and you talk to it, and it'll say like what you say on one side and what they are reading on the other side. So like you and me could be face to face with the phone between us, and I could speak in English and you could speak in Spanish, and then for you, my English would translate across into your side on the Spanish, and for me, your Spanish would translate into my English on my side, right? Which is a pretty cool feature. But they did this. This is still experimental, but they've got this whole AR thing with kind of the sequel to Google Glasses. This is the AR glasses with translation subtitles. So, Ixchell, how would you describe this?
Oh my gosh. So you put on these glasses, which are actually pretty fashionable frames compared to the first iteration of Google Glass.
Simple,
and
right?
And you're just looking at a person. You're like directly looking at them. They talk to you, and you get an overlay on your end of exactly what they're saying. It translates everything they're saying. And now you're understanding, and you're able to not have to look at a device and break away from the conversation, because of course we know that part of interacting with people and building those relationships is the part where you feel like you're communicating directly with them, which you can't really do with a phone translator, because I tried it in Japan. I went to a hairdresser that was it was a very specialized service I wanted. And so my hairdresser didn't speak any English beyond like, hello, how are you? My name is. And so he was trying to, explain to me something quite detailed about hair and hair processing. And he was using Google Translate, and the words, I wasn't looking at his face. We waited for the device to translate, and then I would try to translate. And so it took a long time just to get to one specific item. Right. And then there was really no interaction. There was no link. That we were not communicating really. It felt choppy. It didn't feel personal. And so I think that the AR glasses, is that what they're called? The new AR glasses. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. It looks wonderful. I would just be interested in seeing the battery life.
Yeah. So basically you put these things on, from the person looking at you, it's just like, hey, you're wearing glasses, right? But from you looking at that person, and they're speaking to you in another language, and it just puts in basically subtitles on life, right? So you're walking around, someone's talking to you, and it's like, it just shows up what they're saying. And so you can actually understand. And so I just see this as huge for travelers, right? For easy, right?
And if there's, Google Glass wasn't as popular for the price and what it couldn't do. The price point was just too high, but that then pushed Snapchat to do their own Snap glasses, which did catch on with kind of a small population, but I still see them around. When I was in Japan, there were tourists wearing them to capture video, but now I can really see these AR glasses spreading, especially as a tourist. If you're someone who's traveling all the time, or who doesn't have time to pick up a little bit of the language, or if you're doing business oftentimes, or I would say in a meeting where you might need a translator, but you also want to real time know maybe part of the idea of what's going on in that meeting. This would be, I think it's life changing, actually.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing here is, what's happening here, and I guess we need to respond to kind of the first concern that people have, which is like, the translates are not very good.
Accurate. Yeah.
So that will always still be some issue, right? Even human translators are not always quite accurate, right? So, but I think what's going on here on the back end of Google is that they have also updated their AI to be able to be more accurate, right? And so it's like this big boost of like all these things that are coming out together, and it is going to be significantly more reliable in, you know, as we keep going forward, right? So I think there was a big, huge jump that maybe people are going to start seeing. But this also, Ixchell, kind of goes into like my, you know, my warnings that I give out sometimes about like, hey, our field might just be gone, right? Because, you know, there's going to be a big chunk of people that'll say, hey, you know what, this covers my needs. I don't really, if I have this, I don't necessarily need to spend a bunch of time taking classes because I just want to get the core chunk of my work done, or whatever else it is, right?
Well, you don't have to spend all that time studying and prepping for something that you might not necessarily use as a 100% conversational language all day long, every day of the week. But but I also think then we could have the jobs correcting the translations.
Yeah, well, I mean, honest to God, I think like my first thought is like, this is Tower of Babel right here. Like this is all the languages coming together, unified. We can see each other. This is, you know, like the Babel fish, right? In Douglas Adams, right? Just stick it in your ear, stick it on your eyes, and now I can understand everything that anyone's saying, and everything's cool.
So, Brent, this reminds me of a little gadget, and I know that I probably mentioned it to you when I was in Japan, and at one of their electronics shops, I saw this little, just a tiny device, looks like a cell phone, tiny, small, portable, and you point it at the person who's talking and it translates for you. But again, you're still using, and the when I saw it demoed, it was actually pretty cool. But it's still quite intrusive, right?
You point and this thing it's like being a reporter, right? You're going to talk into this thing, right?
Right. And so the fact that it's just something you wear, it's a wearable, it just makes it part of your whatever, you know, your outfit. And so that I think is pretty innovative.
Yeah, it's going to make a lot of changes going on. So, so anyways, it's something to be aware of, to recognize, and we'll
be on the lookout for.
I mean, really start your imaginations in terms of how that's going to impact your classes and your teaching and all of these things, because there's all sorts of implications there, including like, I mean, don't want to go too much into the cheating conversation, but it's like, okay, well, do you even need to be in this class anymore? If you're gonna, you know what I mean?
Here's the thing, though. Could you really use them with more than one person? Let's say you're in a group, you're having a discussion. Would that pick up different voices? Would you have to isolate, you know, the one conversation? So that's where I'm thinking, I would like to see that. Because obviously, you know, Siri can only recognize one voice, or you wouldn't want it to have someone else use the command and then start dictating things into it, or whatever other voice command helper.
I totally get that. My common response to that, though, is yeah, maybe not today, but real soon, right around the corner, like sooner than we think, right? Which is always the thing. So
sooner than we think.
So yeah, I do.
It's coming.
Yeah, I could imagine it where it would actually do something like it would be range aware, right? So it's like, hey, if someone off to your right is speaking, then maybe smaller text comes in from
channels.
The right, and and then you, as you turn towards that person, then their text comes up underneath. You know, I don't know. There could be all sorts of possibilities. So
and then there'd have to be laws made about people eavesdropping into your conversation. It's a good time to learn sign language.
Well, and the sign language too, for sure. Actually, sign language is part of this too. So like with the camera one, I think like you can do sign and it will tell you what they're saying in sign too. So
that's pretty amazing, because everybody has their own signing style. That is amazing. The amount of data that went into it. Yeah.
All right. So
AR glasses with translation subtitles.
Yeah, the future is now. I'm going to put in some booming background music for that. Probably not, but anyways. Okay, a couple other things before we wrap up on talking about Google here, but One, these have been rolling out, and Ixchell, you didn't totally notice it, but I did, because my institutional, at my school, these didn't roll out until this week, but people have been talking about them on Twitter for a while, which is the emoji reactions. So in Google Docs, if you double click on a word or whatever else it is, on the right-hand side where you can leave comments, now it lets you put in an emoji. And I think I've talked about this in the past. I actually do this as some of my comments for students, right? I want to give them a smile, or I want to give them a thumbs up on their work. Yeah, like, and to say like, hey, this is good, this is working well. And I've been suggesting this to people, but the way that I've told people in the past to do it is basically make a hotkey so that you can bring up your emoji menu, and then you're going to double click on that hotkey, and then you're going to use it. And I've been doing that for years, but
you don't have to anymore.
Yeah, it's right in there. And so you can
eliminating the steps.
I do want to check. I'm going to look at it right now, because does it have most frequent in there? I'm not totally sure. It seems to just bringing up the menu right now.
Yeah,
the regular
it brings
menu.
up the whole menu.
Yeah, you can search, but it doesn't have my most frequent. So not yet, anyways. Oh, actually, it has some at the bottom. I'm sorry, that's not true. That's not true. Wait, what's at the bottom here? Did you see this at the bottom? There's a little plus button. No, that's actually a plus sign. So they've got their own choices. They've got their own choices for what's going to, what choices they think are the most popular. But maybe as you start using them, it seems like there's a choice at the bottom.
Smarter.
Yeah, maybe more frequent or something like that. So it might get smarter. But anyways, emoji are on there so you can get those reactions. And again, we've talked about that in the past, that sometimes icons and emoji can be really powerful communication tools for students, because they might not totally understand what you're writing, especially at lower levels, but they can tell what a happy face means, or they can tell what a thumbs up means, right? And so you don't necessarily need to use all of the developed language to communicate a feeling or express an emotion towards those students as well. So I really like that as a new tool inside of here.
Yeah, that's great.
Next up.
You tell
me, what do you think about this one?
Well, the other one, so I was watching the keynote, and the next one is pretty cool. It hasn't rolled out to me yet, but this is auto-generated summaries. So basically you open up a Google Doc, and it's got writing in it, whatever it is, an essay, an article, text, whatever, you paste it on there. And on the left-hand side, there is a menu where you can, go through the headings, but now there's a little section that says summary. And when you click there, once it's enabled for you, once it rolls out for you, it will auto summarize your document. And that is pretty freaking awesome. That is a student's dream, and also mine, because it's efficient. If you don't want to read a lot of stuff, or if you just want to scan, I don't know. I'm amazed. I can't wait till it rolls out for me. Yeah.
So it seems, I'll point out a couple of things. One, it seems to be like a few sentences. So it's not the whole let's paraphrase this thing and turn it into another document of the same thing, although that might be right around the corner. What I saw was like you have like a 5 or 6 page document, and it gives you 3 or 4 sentences to just kind of explain what it's basically about, right? But that can very easily, because we've already talked about these in the past, right? These summarizer tools that can kind of do more of a paraphrasing or simplify a lot of the language or those types of things. And so it seems that there's kind of the TLDR option here, right? And so you're just going to go, hey, what is this about? How can that help me? And so that can also be really great for your students, though, because if you give them a longer document and they just want to get their head in the right space beforehand, you don't have to write that summary, right? You know, as a teacher, a lot of times I would set my students up, this is about this and this and this, right? And so now it's like, oh, it's just go take a look at that and then figure it out for yourself as you're going through. So that auto-generated summary, again, it's not available for everybody right now, but it seems like it's going to be coming soon, or it's rolling. You know, a lot of these things have been rolling out over the last several days, and some of Google's hard to know when they're rolling out to who. They just kind of seem to pick and choose randomly. I don't know what the rhyme or reason for it is. Yeah, but some of these have come out for me in the last week or so, and so I am getting access to more of them, and other people were posting about them last week or the week before. So I'm not sure when that auto summarizer will come. I don't have it yet either, but it is a cool feature there, and so that's something that I think a lot of students can benefit from as well. Last thing here, Ixchell, I think I tweeted about this and you mentioned the same thing, which is that it's recognizing now regional English, right? And so I had my students, we read a British book in our class this semester, and so some of my students are picking up on the language that's going on in the book, and they're using kind of British ways of expressing things through their reading. I'm like, okay, that's cool, because it shows me that you are watching this and you are, like you're paying attention to that language. But at the same time, I'm like, well, we're also dealing with American English and trying to get along with those. So, so one of the things, the example that my students wrote was talking about math, but they kept saying maths. Right? Yeah. And so, so they're like, oh yeah, the student's going to be doing the A-level maths and something like that. And so what I did, when I went in to look at their document and I highlighted the word, it had a red underline, and I'm like, oh, that's not misspelled, but it is British English. And so I was like, that's a little weird. So I clicked on it, and it showed up, and it said, hey, you're writing in American English, but this is British English. Like, do you want to change your language style? And I'm like, whoa, I'd never seen that before. That is cool. Yeah, so it's actually recognizing regional language. It's recognizing where it's coming from. And then if you have your settings set to be, hey, I'm in America, I'm using American English, then it will point out like, hey, probably an American wouldn't say this, but maybe a British person would, or, an Australian person, or whatever else it is. So I thought that was fascinating.
Brent, I like that it has it included, because I've had students who come in and they're other teachers, not their language teachers, but their university, regular, whatever core subject teachers mark them wrong for the spelling. But in fact, it's not wrong. It's just, we don't use that here. Right. And so students sometimes will tell me, but I was told it's wrong and it's not wrong. It's like, well, you're not wrong. And so now it sort of validates that, okay, you just have to know that it's both. Yeah. Both spellings. That's okay.
Yeah. Like spelling color with a U, or
favorite.
Yeah.
Canceled with a double L. Anybody?
Since we have listeners in England, we should say that we're wrong. America is wrong, and you guys are right. We'll get into a fight about that later, I guess. Yeah, but it's worth the students knowing regardless of where they're from, right? So like they because it's a question of recognizing who your audience is in your writing, and so that's we talk about that with our students a lot, right? And so most of them want to ideally present to their recognized audience, and in our context that's America, but it could be any other country, and they might want to make changes depending on that as well. So so it's just nice, another tool for students to be able to access and quickly look at and make changes and understand some of the differences as they continue to develop their language. But a lot of these, again, Ixchell, I think we wanted to bring this up because they just have far-reaching implications about the future of language study. And like, okay, well, if the computer can do this for me automatically, and if my glasses can translate for me, and if the Google Docs can summarize for me, and it can already check my grammar, and it can do this and this, like, all right, cool. At what point am I going to make the decision to say, like, am I studying English for what purposes, right? Like, is it for my joy? Wonderful. Okay. I really appreciate that. Is it for my business that I'm going to be using like once a year? Maybe I won't be taking these classes so much anymore. Right. And so I don't like being the doomsayer, but like you and I have had a little bit of disagreements on like what this is going to mean long term for us, which is totally cool and it's interesting to see. But I also just see like, okay, well, like maybe I'll move along. Maybe I don't need to spend that time if I can get my idea across now, right?
It just means we have to be flexible in how we view the tools that we're using. Because if we get stuck on, like, for example, I sometimes have a hard time envisioning what you see, but that doesn't mean you're wrong by any means. It means I've gotten so used to something, I'm uncomfortable with change.
Well, and also we're going to say that we as teachers will probably end up shifting our focus as we're talking about language, right? We'll probably end up talking about breaking down fine ideas and how to communicate more complicated concepts, right? Or you know, there's all sorts of ways that we can make these changes, but my thought is just like, hey, if you're a language teacher, start thinking about what your future language teaching might look like, recognizing that many of these skills might become automated for our students. Not everything,
right?
But I think a lot of us we're going to get into is critical thinking and how the way that our language works affects the way that we see the world and the way that we communicate. As always, we are grateful for your support of the show. Ixchell, we got a new supporter, Casey Chung, who is a colleague of mine. And
hi, Casey. Thank you, Casey.
Yeah, very nice, and we appreciate the support. As always, we're grateful for anyone who's listening, sharing the show, whatever else. Like, it's just nice. Thank you so much. We also got some really kind feedback. A few people sent messages to you, Ixchell, I know.
On Instagram and Twitter, there's a couple,
And so people really appreciated the last episode, it seems like. So thank you guys so much for sharing out. That is really kind of the ultimate thing that we can ask for, is that you're just sharing with other people if you think the show is useful. So much appreciated, everybody. Susan Akavan too. Again.
Thank you, Susan.
And we got a few other messages from other podcasters as well. So thank you, everybody who is supporting the show and
who listened.
Yeah. Just thanks for listening.
All right. So Cloze activities, are they legit?
Good question. So this kind of came up. Eric Kurtz. Do you follow Eric on Twitter?
You know, if he has a handle and it's not Eric Kurtz, then I may have things showing up by the handle. But if I'm not, I will be now.
Yeah, he does that. Like, he does Control-Alt-Chief. He does all sorts of cool stuff. And he's
I am not. I am following him now.
How's that possible? Eric's amazing. He does all sorts of cool stuff. But one of the things he showed up with recently was, he wrote a post called Cloze Activities in Google, or I think he called it Cloze Reading Activities with Google Docs Dropdown. And so this kind of tied into what we were talking about with all the Google stuff. One of the things that came out recently in Google Docs is this chips thing that kind of helps you automate and build your documents so that you can do a bunch of business stuff. But he figured out a cool way to turn this into a Cloze activity. I guess we can call it a close, like, like a choose, it's an elimination type activity, right? So what happens is inside of Google, with this option in I think it's insert, and then now there's an option called drop down. You can make a little drop down menu at any spot inside of the Google Doc, right? So it's just a word, and you click on it, and it has a little drop down menu, and so you can make different choices. So like, hey, who's going to bring chips to the party? Choose the person, whatever it is, right? But what it does is it allows for you to create essentially like close or multiple choice or elimination type activities. And so he made this cool post, and we've got it linked in the show notes. But what it does is you can have a blank word on your document, and then you can click on the button to make a drop down menu, and then students can choose the correct word that's going to fill into that blank spot, right? Very, very typical. It's called, in English, English language acquisition activities, we call it, fill in the gap, close activities, gap type activities, whatever else they are. So he made this post about it, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's interesting. And the first thing that I thought about is I haven't thought about close activities as far as the pedagogical validity of it for a while, or not directly in quite a long time. Although, in the past, teachers used to do that all the time. And Ixchell, I think you were saying that when you were learning English, you also played with these a lot.
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed close exercises because, well, number one, it just felt good figuring out that little piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, toward the end, you either skip the hard ones that you can't figure out, and then you just eliminate. So that aspect, I could see why. I mean, I could see maybe not as effective at, if that's the strategy you're taking. But I've also seen students who use it and they struggle. And so it helps them to become aware of what's before a word, what's after a word. I mean, at least those kind of close exercises that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I was thinking about that a little bit, and then almost instantly when I kind of shared Eric's post there, someone else came in underneath me and was like, "Oh, so I see we're doing, this is what we're doing with Edtech is just old fashioned close exercises." And I'm like, okay, I kind of get that. Like I get the snark on that. But again, like I said, because I'm like, well, is this valid? Is this something that we want to use with our students? And I thought we might just have a little conversation around that, because Ixchell, what you're saying, like the motivational side of things matters, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like how did that help you?
Oh, one of the things is I always I like to solve puzzles. And so it would help me to, number one, I knew like, oh, it's a noun, it has to be a noun because there's a the in front of it. And the harder ones I didn't know, and sometimes I would work with a partner, and I think it just felt good. Right. Of course, I can't tell you right now if that improved my reading. I can't. I mean, as a child or as a language learner, an emerging language learner, I didn't know at the time, but it certainly made it so that I spent more time with texts. So that aspect of it, I see as valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you feel good about your learning, then it'll bring you back to it, right? Or it'll encourage you to spend more time in it. The other side, where they're kind of evaluating the quality of close exercises, and there's different kinds of close exercises. So this is a long and complicated conversation, is very mixed, right? So some people say, hey, like this is garbage. Like, this is not helping people learn. It's just kind of temporarily putting something into short-term memory, and then it gets forgotten instantly. And other people are saying, no, this is really valuable. Like, it's employing, thought processes and recognizing how whether something is like interessential or all these different types of things. And I'll point out here, Ixchell, because this article that we're going to share pulls back from research on this, I think as early as 1962, on using close exercises for helping language learners, right? And so that is huge and a long conversation. And then inside of here, it's so funny because it's like, okay, here's all the people that say that this is no good, and it's like long list of people, and then it's like, and here's the people who say that it's great, and it's like right? So it's like, so there is like no agreement here.
There's no consensus, and we're still using close activity. So there's I mean, I think that there is value in using them, and you've got to know when it's appropriate. And obviously not everything calls for a close exercise, and not everything's going to be effectively assessed with one, just as we would do with other type of assessments. We don't use the same one for everything.
Well, one of the things that I thought was wild in here is they talked about this idea of basically just choosing every seventh word. So if it's like a 300 word thing, it's like every seventh word is going to be the blank word. And I'm like, why would you do
that? Weird. That's like, just a, well, I mean, no, you have to be very, you've got to be, there's got to be a purpose in what you're choosing, right? It has to be intentional,
right,
especially whatever you're targeting. I did a close exercise yesterday with some student teachers, pre-service teachers, with articles. So of course the articles are removed. And so, and if I'm looking at targeting specific vocabulary, of course I'm going to remove those. Or if I'm looking at them and if I want them to guess from context and provide words that they've never seen before, that's what I'm going to be looking for. But every seventh word.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird. And so like, so they have this idea of that versus I think what they're calling tailored, tailored cloze activities, where it's like, hey, I'm being very intentional about the choices that I'm making. These are the specific vocabulary words, for example, that I want my students to learn. And so they're saying that different types of activities or different, if you're being more intentional with your choices, they do seem to have, I want to read a little part of this, right? Because they were, the language was pretty interesting, I thought. So they said, the findings. Oh, so this study did their own one, like kind of trying to see about these different types of cloze activities, and this was a scrambled one where they kind of have the words all mixed up with each other. But regardless, it's just kind of being intentional with this. So they said the findings provided a strong support for the claim that scrambled cloze techniques in language learning classes does improve the participants' reading comprehension and paragraph writing. And then it goes on to talk about, some of the issues inside of here. But it says, based on some critical reviews done in cloze-related studies, some modifications in the cloze procedure have been made and other varieties have been proposed, which have been used in language learning programs. So basically, they're getting into the idea that, I would say that the end conversation ends up being, it's kind of, are you crafting this well, right? Are you putting this in a way that is thoughtful and recognizing what the students are going through and what the purpose of what they're doing is? If you're just doing a cloze activity to say, oh, you have to do something out of this text, probably not so much. But if you're setting it up with intention and with goals, then there's a lot of ways to continue to play with cloze activities and to continue to see how successful your students are with it.
Right. So, Brent, we were looking at this feature in the pre-show, and I thought it was really cool because now the add-on is called Chips, right?
Yeah,
in Google Docs.
Yeah, they call these chips. I'm not sure exactly. Like the it's not an add-on, right? It's built right in, but it's like.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. It's not. It's under insert.
Yeah,
right?
They're under.
It's already
insert.
there.
But yeah, we were talking about some different ways that we can maybe use this or varieties of this activity that Eric came up with.
Well, what I was also thinking, those of us who don't use, perhaps maybe aren't using Google Forms as much, because you could probably do something similar, but this makes it right into a Google Doc. So now you could have, other stuff and it just looks beautiful and it's an actual doc, right? Yeah. So it's different than the form.
And if you have, for example, like if you're using Google Classroom or any LMS that can send it out, right, you can send out that copy, the same thing to everyone, which is really nice. But a couple of the varieties that I thought of this while I was looking at at Eric's article there is number one, I thought that you could do like glossing. So if you when you write directions that are maybe complicated, sometimes we put in brackets like a simplified word, right? So so it might be invent, right? And maybe the student doesn't know the word invent, but then in brackets afterwards you would say make up, right? So what you could do with this, instead of having students choose something, you could actually highlight the word invent, make that a drop-down menu, and then the word invent would just be kind of like in a little gray bubble. And if students don't know that word, they could click on it. And then underneath it, you could put in the simplified phrasal verb for it. So they could see that it says, oh, make up, right? And yeah, you could put it in brackets right afterwards. And it's not, I don't know that it's one or the other is better, but it makes it a little bit like, hey, I don't need to look at that if I don't need it. And I will look at it if I do, right? So there could be little ways to play with that language.
You just gave me an idea for teaching phrasal verbs and having students do different types of vocabulary logs or filling in interactive word form charts where they would normally fill one out and submit it to the instructor or whatever, but now that could be a one that another student can take as a practice, right? Because it'd be dropping down. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. So that is cool, right? So then they could work on it together or share with each other and kind of show those parts too. So I thought that's one way. Another way that's very kind of similar to to what Eric showed there is maybe putting in, like, you could do a quiz right inside of there, right? So you could say, hey, which of these is a definition that matches it, or a synonym that matches that meaning, right? And so the students could show their understanding of parts of the text as they go through. There could be lots of different ways to play around with that. So if you just start thinking like, hey, if I could click a word and see different choices underneath that, what can I do with that? So there, I mean, my brain is just starting to kind of think about ways to play with it, but I think there's a lot going on here.
Right.
So if you're interested in Cloze activities, and if you're saying, hey, like, I wanted to do this, but I've only done it on, printed out papers and have students fill these in, or, I've done the underline trick, but then students have to kind of click out the underline and delete it and then write it in, but then when they delete it, then they lose the place where like, there's all these weird little tech problems that come up, and so I think this can kind of help tidy some of those up as well, and give some little bit cleaner options. Oh, and one more thing that's cool about these too, Ixchell, is the color coding. Did you notice that?
Oh yeah, and I love color. Well, you can be organized. Parts of speech, functions, categories, words that don't belong.
Oh, that's a good idea. So I
like word families. Oh my gosh.
Hold on. So now I'm starting to think of things. So
I'm thinking of go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. So parts of speech, right? Let's say you've got a word there, and the word is, decide, right? And you're going to say, hey, the word is decide, but then down below it, you've got that same word 3 times, right? But blue means noun, green means verb, red means adjective, right? And they're just going to choose which color it lights up in. So then you can see, instead of them having to write in or circle it or anything like that, they can just choose the color that it matches up with. So it's the same word, but that color choice tells me that they understand or don't understand the part of speech.
Especially for students who haven't yet or they know the sentence, but they don't know what the parts of speech are and what function that is. I mean, you could have segments of a sentence, right? And you could say, okay, which one of these is the adjective clause and which one is the main clause? Or is it my brain is just, because I just taught this concept and we had such a hard time because we didn't have material for it. And that's just making me think of stuff I could do.
I love that. Yeah. And you could go in all sorts of different directions. I think what we were talking about pre-show too, Ixchell, was that you were saying, well, you do these Cloze activities, but the students always run to the easiest ones first and then just fill in the ones afterwards. So what if you said, like, hey, this one, I want you to do the red ones first, because those are the harder ones, right? And then I want you to do the yellow ones, and then I want you to do the green ones, right? So you could actually color code it so that you're asking the students to go through in an order that you have kind of predetermined for them, not to kind of take the easiest path out of it, right?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff I could see right now, taking from, the paper book, the printed book, and actually turn it into something interactive that you can use over and over. And you could print it at the end once it's correct. And the students would have notes. If the students aren't, don't have access outside of your outside of the classroom, you could actually just print it and they'd have a study guide.
There's so much cool stuff to do with this.
I know, this is cool.
This is like the highlighter's dream. As I'm holding a highlighter.
Yes, here, it's a highlighter's
dream.
So
if you're a person who's like, I'm going to highlight everything, right? This is for sure something that you would want to.
For visual learners who need the visual cues, like, this is great.
Yeah, okay. So go out there, everybody. Please explore with this. Explore those chips. Explore that drop down menu. See what you can figure out. And then send us messages on like, hey, well, you could do this and you could do that, because I'd love to hear more about it as well, or see other people's ways, because I think it's going to be endless, the ways that people can start to implement these ideas.
All right, it is time for our fun finds. And oh my gosh, Brent, I've been telling you about this every day because my fun find is living 5 miles from work.
Yes. You've been very excited about this.
Oh my gosh, I can eat breakfast at home. I sleep a little bit longer. I can come home for lunch, or if I forgot something, it is amazing. I don't stay after work. I used to think, if I live close to work, I'm going to end up staying longer. Yes, if it's an emergency, but now I know that staying, if it's an emergency, I'm gonna get home quickly, so I don't feel as stressed out for having to stay for something urgent. Oh, but it is lovely. I know that not everybody has that, what is
luxury.
It? Oh, the luxury. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
That's great. I am glad, for you. And, I mean, it does, I talk about this a lot teaching at a community college. I'm like, shouldn't the teachers live in the community that they teach in the community college? And like, yes, right. That's ideal. Not that we can all afford it. Yeah. Especially like for me in Orange County, right? It's like, oh gosh, that is hard.
And then and then on top you've got gas prices. So I'm not filling up my tank every week anymore. Now it's every week and a half. And I am so grateful for that, especially right now. Yeah. So having fun with that extra time.
Living close to work. I like that. All right. So mine
what about you?
Is chili kiwi.
Ooh, is that a food? Is it a coffee? Is it a new book? A TV show?
So I'll tell you, this is a question. So when I saw this, I was like, this thing is either going to be awesome or it's going to be terrible. And I was like, I don't know if I should buy this because, it's a risk, right? You're like, hey, is this going to be a good thing or is this going to be a bad thing? But I took a risk on it and I said, okay, I'll buy this thing. It is
what
a
is
food.
It? Ooh,
it's actually
chili kiwi.
Yeah, so it's dried kiwi.
Dried kiwi. That's what dried kiwi looks like. It's not green.
Well, I mean,
with it's chili. Coated in chili.
Because it's coated in chili, like the chili mango, right?
Yeah.
So you did call this earlier, Ixchell. It does have that kind of like that tahine, cayenne pepper. Tajin. Mixed spices, tahine. Paprika, sugar, salt, citric acid, cayenne pepper, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
This thing is like, because I looked at it, I'm like, this is really good. Could be really gross or it could be really good.
Yeah. Is that a Whole Foods item?
Here's the problem. It is not Whole Foods. It is from
Trader Joe's.
Nature to Go. Nope, not Trader Joe's.
Oh,
the biggest problem with this is
Target.
Oh, I don't know, maybe Target, but
Nature to Go.
Discount supermarket. So we have one of those Grocers Direct. It's like one of the grocery outlet or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those discount places, right? So they get like the stuff that's like not selling very well, and then they sell it there at a discount price or whatever else it is. And so I know I'm not going to get this for a long time. Like it's at the store now, but like when it cycles out, it's probably not selling very well. I went and looked for it online. And it's like $16 a bag or something like that. If you can on eBay. And I'm like, on eBay, like I couldn't even find it regularly. So if you can find it, it's a company called Nature to Go. But if you like those chili mango or
and dried fruit is expensive because it's by the pound. And so that's a good find.
And it's $5 for this one. I got it for $5
awesome.
for it's like a pound bag or whatever, and it lasts for a while. So, chili mango or not chili mango, chili kiwi. I was like, I took the risk and it paid off. And so, if you're interested in that, I don't know where you're gonna find it, but good luck. This is a product of Turkey, so it's flown all the way around the world somehow. But everything's flown all the way around the world. We're global.
Try World Market might have them.
Oh yeah, maybe something like that too. So, anyways, that is my fun find.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. As always, we still have pins to give away. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so that we can give you one. If you're giving us a shout out any other way, be sure to tag us on social media. We're on all the platforms.
Yeah, we do have a Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee if you're so interested to do that. Ixchell, I think I mentioned this before. I need to go in and update that and make sure that it's all running smooth.
Patreon.
It's gonna be done, but we do super appreciate it, everybody. So so I will get in there. I've got summer coming up. I'll fix those things up. For show notes and other episodes, please check out diesel.org/62. That's the number 62. Of course, you can listen to us at Voice Ed Canada. That's voiced.ca. And you can find us on Twitter. The show is at DieselPod. And I am at Brent G. Warner.
I'm Ixchell at Ixy_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY. And Assamese, thank you is Donyobad. Donyobad. for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast.
Thanks, everybody.
See you.
Bye.